So my name is David Rodriguez. I'm the extension horticulturalist here with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in Bexar County in San Antonio. That's an image of me at our beautiful children's vegetable garden program at the Botanical Garden, one of the nation's oldest ongoing vegetable garden program for youth, which our Bexar County Master Gardener volunteers oversee. Unfortunately, we've had challenges. We had to cancel this spring with this COVID, and unfortunately, it doesn't look too good going into the fall. But I'm invite everyone to go to do a web search, go to the Children's Vegetable Garden Program blog, and particularly if you live in and around the San Antonio area, within a 100-mile radius or so, we have all the archived agendas both in the spring and fall. So if you can kind of get your kids involved and your community, and just kind of uh, go with those archived agendas. We have grower that does an excellent job with our independent nursery, supplying them the right extension recommended varieties. And you might get an A+ this fall, and then hopefully next spring as well. So please visit the Children's Vegetable Garden Program blog, and if not this fall, hopefully, God willing, next spring we can get back teaching these kids how to be good stewards and excellent vegetable gardeners as well. So we are stationed here in San Antonio, Bexar County area. I know we get a lot of folks attending these webinars throughout the state. So the information that we're giving you should be about the same. You might start a little bit earlier in the fall if you're north of here, and vice versa if you're south of San Antonio, but the information is all good. San Antonio has always been the hub of new plant releases, be it vegetables or the particularly with the Texas Superstar Plant Program, because we've tailored working with cooperators like our farmers on the outskirts of the satellite counties and plant growers, and of course our Bexar County Master Gardener volunteers. So we've been the envy of the state for many, many years. So if you're having challenges of finding not only vegetable transplants or Texas Superstar plants or others, tailor that relationship, with your growers and your independent nurseries, as well as your extension agents in your counties, and grow these programs as we have done since the almost 50 years with Dr. Sam Cotner, Dr. Jerry Parsons, Dr. Larry Stein, Dr. Calvin Finch, Greg Grant, Dr. Bill Welch, Dr. Doug Welch, excuse me, Dr. Steve George, and all the other great horticulturalists that have been here in the Bexar County and San Antonio program. So let's get started. Growing a fall and winter vegetable garden. So the extension service started here in our great state in 1914, over 100 years. So we have a bright legacy and a bright future still ahead of us, and a lot of traditions with the land grant university, Texas A&M. We are funded separately from the university with a unique partnership in the 254 counties in our great state of Texas, and funded a little bit by the USDA for federal, and with the great state of Texas as well. So we do a lot of vegetable trials locally in the Bexar County San Antonio program, as well as statewide. So some of these varieties that we're showing you have proven the test of time locally, as well as throughout the state with these trials that we conduct: tomatoes, peppers, watermelons, and broccoli, and others, particularly vegetables. The Belgians, we have the largest ethnic migration of Belgians in the country when they started the winter garden 40, 50 years ago. So we work with the Verstuyft farms, the San Antonio Food Bank, which used to be the old Vanderwally farm, which is kind of remember back in the 70s, 1,000 acres of carrots, unbelievable. With urban sprawl, we've lost a lot of that, but we remember these traditions and try to keep them going as best as we can. We're very grateful for volunteers, particularly our Bexar County Master Gardeners, our garden volunteers in South Texas, and other volunteers that help us. We have science. We do these replicated trials locally as well as throughout the state. Of course, it's been a challenge this year with COVID, but that's how we get these new introductions, i.e., the rodeo tomato and other selections out there to the market of Texas and our local market as well. So we're going to go ahead and give you some basic guidelines. And some of y'all have heard this before, but the emails that I'm inundated with on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis with subject matter in horticulture and particularly vegetable gardening, we do have to cover these basic principles so y'all can have success when you grow your home vegetable and fruit garden as well. So let's review these uh, uh, some basic and practical horticulture growing principles in regard to home vegetable production. They're basic and they're simple, but we have to repeat, repeat, and repeat because unfortunately, these are the issues that most people have, not only with the school gardens program statewide, backyard gardeners, home vegetable gardens, family vegetable gardens, small acre producers at times, and as well as the community garden programs throughout the state. So sunlight is very, 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 very important. Full sun when you are growing fruits and vegetables. You need ample sunlight. Shade is for your convenience. Shade trees are good, but that's shade is for your convenience. We need minimize the competition of the shade of the trees, the root competition in the growing zone of these vegetables. So air circulation and full sunlight is very, very important. This is the downfall, weed management. You got to keep these weeds. You go into these vegetable production farms, uh, fruit tree orchards, and agronomic crops. They start out clean and they finish clean. Weeds are thieves. I've seen many in an organic gardener turn to herbicides, particularly weed and grass herbicides, to get this Bermuda and other weeds out of control, in control here. These products are safe. It's the people that use them that don't read and follow label instructions. So, do what you got to do, but don't rule out everything from your arsenal. Always start out clean because weeds are thieves. They take nutrition away from the plants, water, and they bring pestilence in, particularly insects, which Molly Keck will cover quite a bit of that tomorrow on her part of the pest part of this webinar series. The other downfall is nutrition. You need to fertilize these plants. You need to build up the positive organic material in the soil. Remember, properly aged manure-based compost is a soil amendment, not a fertilizer. So you do need to fertilize these plants. So vegetables are short-term crops which require a heavy nutrient supply for ample yields. So this is our my home vegetable garden. I have proper spacing, right varieties planted at the right time of the year. I do home composting right in the walkways of the vegetable garden, and we're building up the organic material over time. The organic material long term will hold the moisture in and reduce the needs of extra nutrition. You still need to fertilize, but it also makes the nutrition when you supplement become readily available and easily available to the plant. So these are traditional garden rows. Be a traditional garden rows. Can you walk through there? Can you harvest your plants? Can you get a wheelbarrow through there? Do you have ample sunlight, ample air circulation? Are you spacing the plants for the height as well as the spacing of the plants? So be it traditional garden rows or raised beds. A lot of people are using these raised beds because they have the challenges of gardening on rocks or ergonomics, so you don't have to bend down as much. This is a real good guideline to follow, both on traditional row planting as well as raised beds. So as a good rule of thumb, and once your vegetable garden gets better and better, you might reduce some of this inputs. But as a good rule of thumb, every major spring and every major fall planting, let's incorporate 2 inches, a minimum of 2 inches of a properly aged manure-based compost. Remember what E. coli is and salmonella. So you want to make sure these manure-based compost blends have been aged and decomposed 6 months to ideally a year plus. And then our fertilizer is a 3-1-2 analysis. This here is a 4-1-2 analysis. That's what plants are composed of. 3 or 4 parts of nitrogen, 1 part of phosphorus, and 2 parts of potassium. Thus, this is where this nutrient recommendation comes about. So a slow release fertilizer like a 1959 analysis, 3 pounds of this incorporated with a minimum of 2 inches of manure-based compost worked into your planting zone, into the soil. When you use a synthetic bag of fertilizer, get that fertilizer out, immediately seal the bag and store it. And then do this every spring and fall planting. This is what we call pre-plant granulated fertilizer. If you want to use an organic poultry-based or alfalfa-based organic fertilizer, as we know, the nutrient content is very low, like 423 or so. And so just use 4 times as much, 4 times as much. So instead of 3 pounds of the 1959 per 100 square feet, use possibly 12 to 15 pounds of a good organic fertilizer source per 100 square feet. So for containers, it's a little bit different on containers. Make sure it's a large enough size container. Don't you be using a number 5 gallon container. 10-inch diameter container for growing vegetables is way, way, way too small. You know, 1 tomato plant or 3 peppers or 3 sweet basil plants in a 20-inch diameter container, as we see here, and cages, is adequate. You know, the larger the better. Use a premium peat-based potting mix. Growers media, not potting soil, but potting media, potting mix. And you might want to cut that with 20% finished compost. And lace these containers. Lace these containers as your pre-plant granulated fertilizer with copious amounts of a slow-release container fertilizer, such as Osmocote 18612, and then a weekly basis, also a water-soluble type fertilizer, because you're such a small container and you're trying to accelerate the growth of these plants. So weekly, and have about 3 different types of water-soluble fertilizers and alternate that once a week to the end of harvest. And there's many different types of containers. This is Malcom Beck, the founder of Gardenville. He was a great, great gardener. His wife Delphine as well. And Malcolm, Mr. Beck, not only founded Gardenville and was an entrepreneur that really started the composting industry in Texas. And we refer to him as the godfather of Texas organic gardening. So if you ever get a chance to read up on some of his books that he has out there, Malcom Beck, extra books to your library, it's really a good plus to your library gardening collection as well. The other thing is irrigation, especially planting in June, July, and August, going into September with this heat. You have to have efficient and adequate supplement irrigation. So you're not like the Verstuyft farm that has a deep springs from the aquifer. So we probably don't want to flood irrigate that. They've been doing this for 50 plus years. So for you, for sure, for home gardeners, if you're not using drip irrigation, it's a good way to be an earth kind environmental steward because you're using water very wisely. You're using it right there where the roots of the plant can most efficiently use that supplement irrigation. You're reducing weed pressure and you're minimizing evapotranspiration, particularly if you mulch soon after these July, August, early September plantings get put in as transplants. So I like a living mulch, which is a double shredded hardwood mulch that has finished compost to it. Depending what part of the state you are, you might have a regional type mulch, like in East Texas, probably cypress and cedar mulch. More in the hill country, probably cedar mulch. So mulch, mulch, mulch. 2 inch layer is good, a thin layer, 2 inches away from the crown of the plant. You never put excess mulch or soil up on the crown of the plant. So this is some straw mulch, hay mulch that's used. It minimizes weeds. It regulates soil temperature. It holds that moisture in to minimize the evapotranspiration. And we're being good stewards. We're being good earth kind stewards when we do mulch these plantings soon after. And it looks good. Keeps that weeds down as well too. So following some of these steps that we just talked about, particularly nutrition, drip irrigation, and mulching, we want you to have high yields, heavy yields, tomatoes, and more. You don't need to grow a lot of plants. Just do a real good job on the plants that you've decided as a family to grow. Have a notebook. What successes did you have, failures, and how can you get better both in the spring as well as the fall? So this is what we want you to grow. World record, Guinness Book of World Record tomatoes, and that's why we cover all the basics and principles of vegetable concepts there. So is your garden, you need to answer this question. Is your garden ready to run the race? Is it in full sun? Are you growing on a clean garden? Are you controlling the weeds? Are you spacing your plants out? Are you amending the soil every spring and fall with good aged compost? Are you working your pre-plant granulated fertilizer in? Are you going to win this race? Are you going to grow this World Guinness Book of World Record tomatoes and do a good job? Follow the guidelines. It's proven, folks. We've been doing this for many years. You can do it organically or the conventional way or a combination of both, but just follow these guidelines, please. So disease issues. Normally when you have disease issues spring and fall on your vegetables, how can you improve your growing techniques? Are you following the guidelines that we just talked about? Are you out there often removing yellow leaves? Are you watering the soil and not the leaves? Are you spraying a prophylactic application right after a significant rain event to ward off potential fungus? Mulches help that, particularly with these soil-borne diseases on tomatoes and other vegetable crops. Are you using chlorothalonil type of a fungicide such as Daconil? The key on all these products is not the product, not it's us using them correctly, using them, reading and follow label instructions. That's being a good environmental steward and following the earth kind principles. So don't forget tomorrow, please attend Molly Keck's pest part, the insect part. And a lot of times we get these insect parts because we're not following the horticulture principles that we just covered. Uh, Normally, insects are the cleanup crew that come out at the end, but if we're not doing something correctly, a pest can be an issue at the beginning or midway during our vegetable spring and fall gardening seasons. So let's start with warm weather crops. Warm weather crops. So what are warm weather crops? Warm weather crops, as a rule of thumb, are fruits and berries. Anything that has a seed in it. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, squash, zucchini, bush beans. That's a rule of thumb. They need the warm weather to grow the plant and to have quantity and ample yields from the principles we discussed already. So we always want to do recommended varieties that have proven the test of time. Um, so go to Aggie Horticulture or plantanswers.com under the vegetable section, and depending where you're located in the state, your county should have those lists as well as those two websites. But I always encourage people, try something new, try ethnic vegetables as well, and try different things. But we always want to grow what our family decided on. Of course, what we grow, we can share with friends and families, neighbors. Neighbors locking his gate and his front door because you're bringing them so much zucchini, squash, and okra. And maybe we can share what we grow with and help others as well. Start out with quality transplants with a reputable nursery. You start out with quality transplants that are nice and healthy in season, good quality seed from Johnny Select Seed and other good seed sources. You start out with quality plants and seeds, you'll finish out with a quality. No, well, I got it cheap or reduced price. If you start out with a problem, you're going to have a problem from start to end. Let's briefly talk about tomatoes. Since tomatoes, we need to get these in the ground here pretty quick, folks. Remember, we're running this race. Some of us can have decreased temperatures as early and first frost as early as Halloween, as early as mid-November. So we got to get these warm season crops going and growing quickly. Some of y'all already have them planted in the ground, but y'all might be setting out another set of transplants this week and this weekend. We always recommend Determinate type tomatoes, and these are commercial varieties that we test, and we find the best of the best locally and statewide for the rodeo tomato and these selections that we release statewide as well. So Determinate basically is a bush type. It grows about 4 feet tall. It flowers, it set fruit before the extreme summer heat and for the first frost of the fall. These are typically hybrid selections that have been bred for quality and quality yield. So nutrition is very, very important on these. They're heavy feeders, typically 8-ounce, medium in size to large beef slicing types. They have good sugar to acid ratios and they're bred for disease resistance. We don't really recommend those old-fashioned grandfather types of indeterminates because they have very, very poor disease resistance and they tend to not give you quantity as well as quality yields. And most of those varieties are northern varieties and they really don't perform that well. And they don't have heat tolerance for fruit set potential as well. Everybody knows Celebrity. When we do these trials, Celebrity is one of our controls that we've been doing for many years. Celebrity is the most planted tomato nationwide, came out of the San Antonio program in 1982 with Dr. Jerry Parsons. So Celebrity is always a good standby to grow. It's really not a true determinate. It's really could be considered an heirloom now since it's semi-determinate, but it's always a good variety to look out there. Tycoon is Celebrity's 8 ounces in size. Tycoon, which is a Texas superstar, is a beef slicing type with 1 pound plus fruit on it. Thus, not only a rodeo tomato years back, but made it as a Texas superstar plant, which very, very few fruit and vegetables are recognized as Texas superstars. But we found out that this tomato is so awesome, both for small acre producers and commercial producers out of Florida, that home gardeners really, really like Tycoon tomato as well. Has nematode resistance like Celebrity and good disease resistance as well. And it has good heat setting capacity as a beef slicing tomato with minimum cracking in that fruit once it's established and properly maintained and properly irrigated too. Sunbrite, look for other hot name varieties. Sunbrite's a good one to look for. If you've never grown it, look for it and try it as well. And of course, Valley Cat, it hasn't been recognized as a Texas superstar just yet, but we're really, really thinking about making this an official Texas Superstar tomato next year. And of course, in the Rio Grande Valley and Florida, the commercial guys use this one as a reliable one, and it does excellent for home gardens. Remember, these varieties have a good sugar to acid ratio, as well as quantity and quality yields, and that's why we recommend these. For a cherry tomato, if you're not familiar with this, you can buy seed from Johnny Select Seed. This is the best of the best small fruited tomatoes. You never tell a person how good a pepper or a tomato is because taste is so subjective. But this was one of the rare ones that we have found out that everybody likes. Excellent for the school gardens programs as well, because one plant produces so much fruit. And then BHN 96 Dwarf Cherry Surprise Tomato that you can buy seed from Johnny Select Seed if your nurseries don't sell these as well. So real quick on tomatoes, we just hit it real quick. We have on My Extension 210 on our YouTube channel, My Extension 210, the basics of growing tomatoes much more in depth. So hopefully, if you have time, if you have not attended this last week, we did this, or a couple weeks ago or so, and we have it archived on our My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Subscribe to that YouTube channel, and there's other horticulture and other good webinars that we have archived on there as well. So peppers. So small fruited tomatoes, pole beans, peppers, and eggplant, if they were planted in spring and they still look nice and healthy through July and August, you've been watering them, keeping the weeds out, keeping them well fertilized, insects, disease, and spider mites off them. You cut all these plants back if you have not done so. Small fruited tomatoes, peppers, as well as eggplant. Cut the centers out, and even okra. Cut the centers out about 20% or a third. Kick up the fertility on them, and they should flush out for the fall time. Remember, you have to have leaves underneath that cut, so cut them back. Remember, pruning is a dwarfing and rejuvenation process, but you really have to kick up the water and fertilizer going into the fall. Or better yet, we have found out if you set out fresh transplants as early as a few weeks or this weekend, for sure, the fresh transplants will always outproduce the carryover plants of the springtime. So let's get those done here pretty quick this weekend. So, we live in Texas. We like making our salsas and our hot sauces. Jalapenos are a must. And we have a lot of crazy people planting the super hot peppers. Boot Jalapeno, the ghost pepper, Scorpion Trinidad, Carolina Reaper. Peppers should complement the meal, the dish, not put you in the hospital there. So, try the ones that your palate and your taste buds, and always have some Bluebell ice cream nearby just in case they're too hot. Bell peppers, you can set out some transplants if you have not done so for the fall. Bell peppers are like cauliflower, like Dr. Sam Connor always used to say. You really need to kick it up even more when you grow bell peppers and cauliflower, because you need to grow a lot of leaves early that shade off those developing pods so the sun doesn't burn them, and then large leaves to wrap those cauliflower later to blanch and to eliminate that sunlight, so we have beautiful white ivory cauliflower. So kick it up even more when you grow bell peppers and cauliflowers, folks. And those small tomato cages, 33-inch and 42-inch tomato cages. Don't use those on your tomatoes. Those ones that were hecho en Mexico. Use those for your bell peppers, your eggplants, tomatillos and sweet basil and other basil plants as well. Eggplant, this is Florida Market or Black Beauty, are the large, big beautiful black eggplants, and then you have the oriental ones like Ichiban, which grill up so well on the barbecue grill. I like eggplant parmesan as well. The key on eggplant, if you don't, after you cut them, you put some sea salt on them, you sweat them, you get the beads of the out of them so they're not bitter. So eggplants are fun to grow and very tasty if you grow the right ones and you sweat them after you cut them immediately. So all these ones that we talked about, getting late in the game, you might say, because you need to get all these in by late August, early September, depending where you're at this part of the state. So some people have been planting peppers and eggplant and tomatoes as early as the 4th of July weekend and been scattering plants out on drip irrigation throughout late June, July. And for the latecomers, hopefully you potted a few up, grew them as bigger plants for 30 days. So the later you wait in the fall for these warm season tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, you got larger plants to set out. So hopefully you went to plantanswers.com, studied up on our rodeo tomatoes and how to pot up some of these plants so you have larger plants to put out. But you got to get these going here this week, no later than the first part of September on these warm season crops. Plants that you can direct seed, if you have not done so, would be direct seeding of different types of zucchini, squash, the beautiful white scallopini, scallop type squash as well. If you've had Molly Keck might cover squash vine borers, but plant these tight, plant them real tight. That might minimize squash vine borers from getting to these. And then once the plants are growing, you thin them out when leaves start touching each other, cutting them with loppers, and you might minimize squash vine borers from getting to these squash and zucchini on these plantings. Cucumbers are fun to get the kids involved. I like to grow one called Sweet Slice, which is a burpless, uh, uh, easy one to grow. Again, one plant should produce 8 to 12 marketable cucumbers. So again, you don't have to grow a lot of plants. Just give it a little supporting structure. You might grow Sweet Success besides Sweet Slice and Jade, and these are fun for the kids to grow as well. All those are warm season crops that we've covered. Bush beans in the fall, besides green beans. Some of y'all have been growing southern peas as a green manure crop, cover crop, and if you've ever harvest young southern beans, they're as good as bush beans when they're young before you let them turn purple or color up and then shell them for fresh or dry. Bush beans, you can grow yellow and the purple ones as well in the fall, which are very colorful for Thanksgiving dinner. Those are a lot of fun, and you get much more higher and quicker yields than the Poe ones, especially in the fall time. Get the kids involved and look at those smiling faces. And remember, when you're looking for bush beans and squash and zucchini and other crops, go through them 2 or 3 times. The key on this slide here is these plants push out the best, the most nutritious, the best genetics on the first wave of production. So you want to get these squash, these zucchini, these cucumbers, bush beans, and other when they're very young, when they're very tender. That's when they're going to be the tastiest, the most nutritional. If you miss them and you see some that are hiding, zucchinis that are big as baseball bats, okra as big as a huge fish, the plants, they're not going to taste good. And the plant is going to be very, very susceptible of disease, insects, and spider mites. And the genetics, the mother plant has pushed out all the energy, and it's going to stop when she let these things go to seed, unless you're collecting seed. And that's good on some of these open pollinated varieties to consider that for the best of the best that you grew both in your spring and your fall vegetable garden. So let's talk about cool weather crops. Warm weather crops are planted as early for the fall, the 4th of July weekend, the heaviest in late July, the month of August, but you got to get them planted early September. So the challenge is now we go to cool weather crops. Cool weather crops start as early as mid-September, typically mid-September. You know, the third week of September, fall is official, through the month of October. We typically go with cool weather crops, including the cole crops, C-O-L-E crops, cole crops as transplants on the third leaf set, healthy young green transplants that are insect and disease free. Cole crops include broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower, and others. Look at this smiley face here. She's so happy growing her green magic broccoli. Look at to the left. Nice tight head broccoli, a Texas superstar plant as well. I challenge anyone to put green magic broccoli with other selections of broccoli. Nothing compares to green magic broccoli. You plant mid-September. Those transplants come in for Thanksgiving dinner. Early to mid-October, those come in for Christmas dinner, and then you let a few of those go. You harvest the main large terminal head, and then you have the little side shoots, and then you let some of those flower in January, yellow dainty flowers that attract pollinators and the bees, because it's so hard to find plants flowering in the month of January. Green Magic Broccoli is the best of the best. More information on this and other Texas Superstar plants you can find on the TexasSuperstar.com website, as well as Aggie Horticulture and PlantAnswers.com website as well. Look at that. That's what happens when you have good spacing, good varieties of transplants, a good nutrition and fertility. You almost have to get a chainsaw to cut some of these guys as well. But look how tight that is. They're nice and tight. They're not open. That means quality is there. And really, broccoli, you can freeze it, stir fry it, eat it raw. You can eat the stem. There's so much you can do with broccoli, and it's a very flexible crop, and many things you can do with broccoli. And it's very good and healthy for you as well. Head cabbage, you know, we do a wonderful job growing head cabbage, including cheers and other selections of head cabbage. You know, you can grow a 3-pound, minimum 3-pound head cabbage. HEB in the produce section usually like to get 1.5-pound cabbage, but for home gardeners, there's no reason growing a few plants that they're 3-pound plus of good quality marketable head cabbage. Again, follow the same guidelines for transplant. Third leaf set as the broccoli. First planting goes in about mid-September for Thanksgiving dinner. Second and best planting goes in for October for Christmas dinner. And these selections that we talk about for the fall, we also do for mid to late January for February for spring harvest as well. Cauliflower. Look how beautiful this snow crown cauliflower is. Beautiful white and blanch. Remember, peppers, we grow a big tree, leaves to cover the pods that are developing. So we go get sunburn and big pods. Cauliflower, we grow big leaves. And once we see the rice occurred about the 50-cent size in the middle of that plant, and we get those big leaves that we've been pushing with nutrition. We cover them to eliminate light so we can have this beautiful ivory colored cauliflower. September for Thanksgiving, October for Christmas dinner, and then late January through February for spring planting as well. Look at that Chinese cabbage. Oh, this young fella's never going to forget this experience. The one on the right is called Nappa Valley cabbage, a bok choy selection, and a pak choy selection is to the left, called Joy Choy. So these are fun, and they're Asian type vegetables. Lots of fun to grow these types and learn about making stir fry, cabbage wraps, or even soups with these as well. And these are a lot of fun and get the kids involved growing these types of Asian Oriental type vegetables and these cabbages too. Same timeline: early September, first planting; October, second best planting; carry over into spring planting with the third; with late January through February plantings as well. I like celery, and yes, you can grow celery. You probably have to start your seed almost 45 days ago to get a transplant ready or so. Our nurseries do a good job selling them and growing them for fall planting. You want to get these in the ground about early October, and they'll be ready for harvest typically about February, early March. So it is a long-term crop, and you tie them up, you cut those leaves off, you got those petioles, the stems. Celery is an unusual plant, but lots of fun to grow as well. So you might try to look for some celery and see how you can grow some as well. We put globe artichokes in there as well. Emerald is one of the best ones to consider, an imperial. It is a perennial crop. We plant these plants, usually 4-inch plants in October, larger ones going into January. And you vernalize the winter with them, and then they flower. They produce these chokes before the flowers open up, typically March and April, and they're a perennial type plant, and it's a fun crop to grow. You should dig them, um, put them to sleep in June for the summertime. Dig them in late August, early September, and reset them in their place as a perennial. Don't grow them in the same place, and you'll have better growth and production on these as a perennial crop. This is another ethnic group of plants. You know, only the Italians were growing broccoli. Broccoli is a new introduction since the 50s, and globe artichoke, the Sicilians grow these in California, in Castroville, California there. But these are a fun crop to grow. And let a few flower. They make a good floral plant as well. Got to get your strawberries in the ground too. October in the fall is the time to plant strawberries. A lot of fun. We grow strawberries as an annual, an 8th-month crop. We harvest March and April. We pull them out in May since they bring a lot of disease, insects, and mites. So we grow them as an annual 8th-month crop in Texas. Now, it's a big-time spray crop in Florida and California because they grow them 14 months out of the year. But we can get low inputs if we grow them correctly here. But grow them in October. Find the plants in early October through about December. Fun crop to grow. Festivals of strawberry that we recognize as a Texas superstar. But any good quality, healthy strawberry plants that you find October, November, plant them. Follow the guidelines on the Aggie Horticulture website and plantanswers.com, and you'll have a lot of fun growing strawberries. One plant equals 1.5 pounds of quality fruit. These newer varieties that are out there, you have multiple harvests, so you're not bringing all one crop in at one time. And you can let them go from red, maroon to the peak of perfection, unlike the ones at the grocery store, which are 90% ripe. They're non-climatic, meaning they're not going to ripen anymore as the ones in the grocery store. So as a home gardener growing a few of these plants in a hanging basket, a large container, or in raised beds, a big treat for the kids to go out there and harvest fresh strawberries out of the garden. Very fun crop to grow. Sweet potatoes, a lot of us planted sweet potatoes back in March, April, May. Long-term vine type crop. I think they do best in large containers, 20-inch diameter plus, about 3 to 5 slips. And we harvest in October, and a fun crop to grow. And then we'll have the best sweet potato pie for Halloween. Let them cure and store for at least 30 days. As starch converts to sugar, pecan, sweet potato pie for Halloween and all the way through Thanksgiving and Christmas. A fun crop to grow. Sweet potatoes, maybe you need to try these next year as well. Most of all your root crops are direct seeded, and we need to do most of our root crops starting in the month of October as seed. And anything that's a root crop as a cool season plant is carrots and beets and turnips and radishes. Yeah, don't forget rutabagas and things like that. We can do multiple plantings from October, which is the biggest month, to early to mid-November, and then multiple plantings all the way up to probably about early March, depending where you're located. And that grow web, that insulate white cloth, as we do for early plantings of tomatoes, you might use that to cover these young seedlings when they germinate if you're worried about late plantings with frost. It does a wonderful job on that. Garlic, remember Halloween and vampires? Garlic is the time you plant in the month of October. Look for Louisiana, Spanish type, Mexican white Creole types. Look for certified registered garlic that you find at your nursery and feed store, which are usually the right variety for you to plant, not the ones that you get from the produce section at the grocery store. So this is like a tulip bulb almost. You have a basal plate, which is the roots. You extract the biggest garlic cloves, and that's what you plant in October, and then you bring this harvest in typically May and June. So it's a long-term crop. You need good drainage, good soil. Do not overwater them because they'll rot out on them. But garlic's a lot of fun. You can dry shallots as well, and elephant garlic, which is the big type as well. Fun to grow, lots of fun growing garlic. But we set these out in the month of October. Onions, we have a long history, particularly with the Texas Supersweet onions, the 1015Y onion, which made a huge industry for our state with Dr. Leeper and Dr. Leonard Pite with Texas A&M University. We have tons of write-up on the Texas Super Sweet Onion program, both on plantanswers.com and on Aggie Horticulture. We put out the little plantlets as early as typically mid-November, but really our multiple plantings starting at mid-November. But really the best planting should be in the month of January. We do short day variety or neutral selections. And we grow 11 leaves. One leaf represents each ring. So nutrition, weed management is key. Planting them thick, thinning them out as green onions, and then getting these big bulbous types. You need the time on this. 11 and 13 leaves. And please, if your feed store, your nursery's not carrying good quality onions, go to Dixondale Farms, order them, mail order, and learn everything you need to learn about onions at Dixondale Farms, the nation's largest family-owned onion operator of plantlets for the nation. They supply 90% of all the onions for farmers and seed companies. Go to the Dixondale Farms for more information how to grow onions as well as leeks. And look at there's old Ted Ritchie there being a good gardening mentor for this young fella here. Look at that onion. He's never going to forget this experience of growing them as well as harvesting them. All your leafy greens, we start setting out a lot of your leafy greens, either transplants and or direct seeding when the soils have really cooled off, like we do pansies, usually after Columbus Day. Yes, there is Columbus Day. At the end of October, going into early November, and doing multiple seeding and planting from late October, November through about January, February. Spinach is a must. We like a semi-Savoy type spinach. So look for transplants as well during November, December, and January. If Popeye likes spinach, we should grow spinach, and then all other leafy greens, spinach. Grow some turnip greens. Beet greens are excellent. Kales are fun, and all the different types of leaf lettuces as well. A lot of people are doing this asparagus. The Roman legions used to grow asparagus every 20 miles. And you know what happens to one out of every 3 people that eat asparagus. UC 157, University of California, Riverside, came out with this much, much more superior than Martha and Mary Washington, of course, great ladies of this country. But these are male sterile selections. So look for crowns in the month of January of planting UC 157. You got to plant 6 to 10 plants per family member if you like asparagus. So, you know, growing melons, growing sweet corn, and growing asparagus is a challenge for most home gardens because it takes up a lot of space. And this is a true perennial crop that can last 10 to 12 years in Texas easily. So you got to have the space. You got to grow a lot of plants. Read up more about asparagus, both on plantanswers.com and on the Aggie Horticulture vegetable section on asparagus. And then, of course, mid-January, Grandma would be happy when you grow some sweet peas for the springtime, but this is the time on a trellising support structure like a chain link fence or chicken wire that we grow snow peas and sugar snap peas in the mid-January to early February. And some people are even doing early plantings in mid-November if you're in San Antonio or south of here. So do multiple plantings and follow that guideline as we do okra and growing zucchini and squash and cucumbers and bush beans. Get these when they're young and tender. You know how expensive these are at the grocery store? You know, if you want young, tender pods, snap peas, you can eat both the pod as well as shell the sweet peas in them if they get too big as well. So don't forget next week, next Tuesday, I'm going to do 12 months of vegetable gardening. The challenge that we have year round and both in the fall with these warm weather crops and cool weather crops is timing. How many am I going to grow? When am I going to grow them? Do I have enough space in my garden to grow these? I'm going to cover and highlight some of these vegetables and others next Tuesday. So hopefully you can join us on that webinar as well. We've talked about Aggie Horticulture and plantanswers.com. Lots of great information there. Our horticulturalists have archived a lot of great information, educational brochures as well. Utilize them if you're not utilizing. Study up on these crops and others. And then, of course, on the Bexar County Extension Service website, keep an eye on what we do locally and all the webinars and the archived information we have here for the San Antonio and areas surrounding folks. Folks, if you're serious about vegetable gardening, if you don't have Dr. Sam Connor's Texas Vegetable Book and crop rotation and learning about the family of these vegetables and much more, Dr. Sam Connor was the vegetable specialist for the winter garden here and locally in the mid to late 60s before Dr. Parsons came here in 1974. A must. Go to Texas Gardening Magazine to order this online. The best buy there is on Texas Gardening Magazine. Thank you for today. We'll have this archived within a week or so. Ruby does such a wonderful job archiving these and editing them. And please go to the My Extension 210, not only for this, but all the archive, and subscribe to it as well of all the good things we're doing for 4-H, Molly Keck and her pest webinars, and other great things that we have archived there as well. I always like to do a bonus plant. We're in Texas. We like onions. We like those tomatoes for our salsa, and we like the cilantro. You know, you can grow cilantro any time of the year. You direct seed and do multiple seedings, ideally starting in October in containers or in your vegetable garden in October, and do multiple plantings all the way to early March. Late plantings, you probably have to cover new seedlings with the insulate, the grow web, but really we can do multiple plantings of cilantro, and that's a must. Chinese coriander, and let it flower in April, May, so you can be self-sufficient by collecting the seeds, the brown BBs, and you get so many bees and beneficial pollinating insects that will come to your spring garden when you grow those zucchini and squash and cucumbers in the spring, and it looks very beautiful, white, dainty like flowers, almost like baby's breath. And of course, coriander seed is what we call cilantro when we let it go to seed. Is coriander. When they turn brown, they use them for Mexican galletas and cookies and things like that. And you can let it naturalize in some places of your landscape, or collect the seeds and wait till October when they set seed in April, May, and start seeding in October through early March. So there we go, folks. I hope y'all learned a little bit today. There's my email address. Don't forget to send me emails. Good quality images attached to the emails of landscape gardening questions. And don't forget to visit us and on our Saturday radio show, the 1200 a.m. Lawn and Garden Radio Show with Mr. Bill Rohde. We've been doing this for almost 15 years. Mr. Rohde's my radio mentor. He's been doing radio for over 54 years. He's in the Texas Radio Hall of Fame as well. So let's go to some questions, Ruby, and let's try to answer as many as we can today.
Okay, our first question comes from Clay Sloan. I was told cedar mulch should not be used on vegetable gardening as the cedar oils kill some things that is better suited for walkways. I was advised to use a composted hardwood over food crops, but not cedar. What does Texas A&M say about that?
Okay, good question. I prefer, it depends what part of the state you're at. If you're in Central and South Texas, I prefer the double shredded hardwood mulch with compost, which we refer to that as a living mulch. Okay, remember when you put mulches down, all the benefits it has. June, July, August, and September, and late April, May, it's hot out there, not only for our vegetables, but our landscape plants. So a 2-inch layer, a minimum 2 inches away from the crown. You never work in, when you're prepping our vegetable garden, the coarse material. You move it away, and a good mulch, when it breaks down, really becomes a compost. The cedar mulch is okay as long as it's finely shredded. You're putting a thin layer. You're not putting it up on the crown. The Juniperus ashii, which we refer to as the hill country juniper, the oil content's very, very minimal. If anything else, it has some attributes to it. The eastern red cedar has, which they make old cedar chests out of, really has more of the insecticidal deterrent qualities to it. Either one's fine, but I really prefer the double shredded hardwood mulch, a finer material with compost in it, or do what you said and follow that guideline as well.
Great questions, guys. Okay, the next one comes from Bobby. I was unable to find Valley Cat seed anywhere. Tried Johnny's Select Seeds, but they did not have any. Any other sources?
Yeah, you probably, most of y'all, that only grow a few plants. Let's support small business. We really need to with the economy right now in this COVID. So try to, if you're only growing a few plants, you're not going to be, time is going to be, you're not going to have the resources and time to grow a quality transplant. So try to buy it from your independent nursery, please. And if you do go the seed route, most of us, unfortunately, please put a quality transplant out there. And it really makes you wonder, when we put our transplants out, that now we have good growers that can do that for us. And we don't want to put a leggy, stretchy looking plant, yellow plant out there. But do a web search. If you do a web search out there for Valley Cat, you'll find it. It's getting too late to put these warm season transplant seed types out. So that's why we got to put large transplants out here pretty quick. And a lot of us potted these up about 30 days ago. We planted a few on drip. We're going to plant larger ones here this week. So seed, it's too late. The only thing you direct seed is what? Review question. Direct seed, squash, zucchini, scallopini squash, maybe cucumber transplants, and of course bush beans. Go ahead, Ruby.
Okay, thanks, David. The next question comes from Owen Kaiser. How deep should you pot tomato transplants? I've heard that you bury the leaves and they turn into roots. Is this true?
Yeah, this information planting tomatoes real deep. Honestly, that's a northern thing, or people that are grow these real ugly looking, stretching yellow transplants, and that's why they dig trenches and plant them real deep, particularly up north. I don't really encourage that, particularly if you're on heavy clay type soils, because my experience says uh, if it's a rainy event or you water too much, they tend to rot. If you look at this tomato right here, this larger plant that's about 30 days old, these were little transplants 30 days old, 30 days ago. It's doubled, tripled in size, good girth on the trunk, very nice, green, healthy plant, a very well-defined root system. If you look at the trunk of these plants, if they do not have purple, hairy-like appendages to them as a small transplant, for sure I would not plant these deep. These young transplants that have that purple hairy appendage-like structures to that main stem are adventitious support type roots. Those you can plant deeper in these containers when you pot them up or in the landscape, but I really don't encourage planting them often. If you start out with a good quality plant, there's no need for it. Now on tomatoes and some of these, well, mainly tomatoes, when you plant these plants, if the leaves are touching the ground, you might trim those off. Mulch for sure, because a lot of diseases come from the soil. The mulch will minimize that, and pruning those leaves touching the ground will help minimize disease potential as well.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Jennifer. Having problems with my 3 bell pepper plants. They make flowers. I tried to hand pollinate them and they still don't produce. Do you have any comments on that, David?
Okay. All the solanaceae crops, and you can learn more about families of crops with Dr. Sam Connor's The Texas Vegetable Book, including tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, are wind pollinated. So you wasted your time trying to hand pollinate them, as some people do with zucchini and squash that are both male and female flowers. It's a perfect flower. So that was a waste of time. So they're probably not setting fruit because of temperatures. Remember, when temperatures get 90 degrees plus, very fruit gets set. That's why we have definitely spring and fall planting seasons. So if this is a spring carryover crop, as we talked about earlier, you can trim the center out by 20% or a third, really kick up the nutrition, mulch them a little bit, and water more to flush them out. Remember, pruning is a dwarfing and rejuvenation process. It'll push them out for the fall, and hopefully you get some pods. Remember, peppers and cauliflowers, you really have to fertilize big time. And remember, these carryover plants of small fruited tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, possibly pole beans from springtime, new transplants or seed will all of pole beans, bush beans are really better for fall, will always outproduce carryovers from the springtime.
Okay, thank you, David. And I see in the chat box that some people are leaving other comments for questions, and that's great. Sharing information is always great. The next question comes from Cindy. It says, how do you sweat an eggplant?
Okay, so a lot of people don't grow eggplant, or they don't like the taste of eggplant because of the bitterness. Okay, so a couple things with eggplant. You have to harvest it when it's uniform in size, and you have a good sheen to the fruit, and no green streaks on it. very few green streaks to it, and a nice sheen to a purple color. So that's when you don't want to pick them too early. That's one thing. And when you harvest them, you keep the cap, the calyx attached to it, as what you see to the left. It keeps it fresher this way. When you're ready to use them, you want to use them within 4 to 7 days after you harvest. Both the Florida market or Black Beauty or the Asian Oriental ones like the Ichiban, which is my favorite, the skinny ones. Okay. So the way you sweat them is when you cut to them to make eggplant parmesan, which I love, or grill them on the grill like the skinny ones, the Asian Ichiban types, Oriental types. When you cut them, you put a little bit sea salt on them, okay, on that cut part, and it beads. It brings that bitterness up with the water with that salt. Then you just get a paper towel. You take the sweat and the salt off, and then put olive oil or whatever you're ready to go to town on cooking them and preparing them. And you will enjoy them that way too.
Okay, thank you, David. Our next question comes from Mark from San Antonio. Is it too early to transplant cucumbers? The temperatures are still really hot. I bought 2 and they died before the sun went down. What did I do wrong?
I think you'd be best off right now direct seeding cucumbers. Sweet Slice is my favorite. Sweet Slice, Jade, Sweet Success. Yeah, it's too early for transplants. I would probably do transplants on the 3rd leaf set. Bigger does not mean better on squash, zucchini, or melons. You want young, very small, well-rooted plants, no more than 3 leaves. People that buy these huge plants are no good. They get stunted. So direct seed now through about mid-September at the latest, or set out transplants from early to mid-September.
Okay, our next question comes from Balaji. Should we start with seeds or transplant for the winter crops?
Depends where you're at and what you're growing. Remember, all the root crops, carrots, beets, radishes are all directly seeded. We start October all the way to March with the best in October and multiple, I'm going the wrong way, with multiple plantings. Leafy greens is optional. You can do a combination. A lot of people have problems direct seeding spinach, so they go with transplants if you can find healthy transplant. But really, if you're going to do seed of your co-crops, COLE crops, cauliflower, cabbage, those types, broccoli, you need to do seed now. You need to direct seed now, or wait till mid-September to mid-October and set out healthy transplants on the 3rd leaf set.
Okay, so our next question comes from Owen. Can I plant broccoli at the base of my tomatoes?
You can plant, just space them out. You want good air circulation for both plants. So potential growth of each, just make sure that they're spaced out adequately.
Okay, our next question is, what is the best mulch to use? I grow peppers, herbs, and lemons.
Okay, so the mulch question right here. Use a double shredded hardwood mulch with compost that's aged, a living mulch. That is the best for Central and South Texas and most of the state. Depending what part of the state you're at, you might use cypress and pine bark mulch more in the east of Houston.
Our next question comes from Jennifer. Is it best to fertilize containers with liquid fertilizer or dry fertilizer after planting, and how to dose them when the directions say it is per square feet.
Okay. All right, good review question. And let's go to that slide here. So on container plants, we want to make sure, first of all, that they're getting plenty of sun, that they're got good air circulation, and most importantly, folks, that it drains in the container. You never let water stagnate in a saucer, and you use a good peat-based potting mix, not potting soil, and cut that with 20% finished compost. Remember, compost is not fertilizer, it's a soil amendment. And we lace these containers with copious amounts of slow release container fertilizer, ideally as you would do your pre-plant granulated fertilizer with the potting mix, the media, like an 18-6-12 Osmocote. And then once a week, use the water soluble fertilizer. Have 3 types, be it liquid Hosta Grow, Miracle Grow, something else. 3 types, and do that once a week. And it should tell you per gallon of water. And most of them is usually about 2 tablespoons for a gallon of water.
Okay, thank you, David. Do we have time for one more question, David?
Yes, one more.
One
Please.
more. Okay. The next question comes from Fonz. How do you control Bahia grass from getting into the garden?
Yeah, that's going to be a big challenge there. So being a grassy weed, you're probably going to, if you cannot pull it or grub it, and it's green and actively growing during the off season, if it's kind of semi-dormant, water it, get it back to a new growth, and then use a non-selective herbicide containing glyphosate with a weed and grass killer, weed and grass glyphosate, but use it remember, these products are safe. It's how they're used. And then if it's actively growing and your vegetables are growing, then you might have to spot apply like with a wick or a sponge, but be very careful on that directly on that green part of what you need to kill out.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, that's it for today, everyone. If we didn't get to your question today, please feel free to email it to David. There's his email address right there on the screen. And, thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate you guys, and hope you guys learned it a little bit today. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ruby, Denise, everyone. And don't forget my extension 210 YouTube channel. Have a great day.